You wake suddenly. The air is thick, damp, heavy with the smell of medicine and something sour you can't quite name. Your head is resting on a thin pillow. Rough linen scratches against your neck as you move. Somewhere in the room, a man coughs violently. Another voice whispers a prayer. Gaslight flickers along the walls, casting long shadows across rows of iron beds. And then you notice something strange. No one is speaking loudly. No one is moving quickly. The room feels careful, as if everyone already knows something you do not. A nurse passes between the beds carrying a small lantern. She does not look at you. And that is when you begin to understand. This is not an ordinary hospital ward. You are in London, sometime in the 1800s, in a place where people are brought when the sickness begins. Cholera. And now, you are here too. Before we go further into tonight's story, take a moment to subscribe to The Sleeping Spaniel. These stories are slow journeys into the darker corners of real history, places most people would never want to visit. But tonight, you are already here. You can hear the breathing of the patients around you. You can feel the damp air on your skin. You are inside the ward. This is not a horror story. This is history. When the ward is still silent. You wake up not from a voice, not from a touch, not from pain, although the pain is already there, spilling over your body like cold water. You wake up from a sound, quiet, uneven, like something wet being dragged across a stone somewhere under the floor. Not footsteps, not the creak of a wheel, not a cough. The sound is so faint that at first you think you're dreaming it, but it repeats itself, slowly, with pauses, as if someone or something can't move straight. You don't open your eyes right away. The air in this room is heavy. It sticks to your face, to your lips, to your eyelids. It has the sour smell of wet cloth, old wood, hot bodies, cheap vinegar, and something else, salty, musty, human. That's the smell of a room where too many patients lie too close together. A thin pillow under the back of your head. Under your fingers is a coarse linen sheet, slightly damp, as if it had been dried too quickly or had already been used more than once. Your shirt sticks to your neck and back. Your throat is dry. Your tongue is heavy. There is a bitter taste of metal in your mouth, as if you had held a coin between your teeth all night. Someone is coughing somewhere nearby. Not harshly, not deeply. It is not the kind of cough that tears your chest. It is different, empty, tired. The cough of a person who has long since exhausted even fear. You open your eyes. The light here is not daylight. It does not come in through the window the way it comes into an ordinary room. It hangs in the air in spots. It trembles on the wall. It floats on the metal headboards of the beds. Gas lamps or oil lamps, you cannot yet tell. They stand far apart, and there is darkness between them. Not complete, not black. The kind where someone can stand silently, and you will only see them when they move. First, you see the ceiling. High, gray, with spots of moisture. Then the shadow of your bed frame. Then row after row of other beds, thin figures, mounds of blankets, someone's hand hanging down, pale, unnaturally still. You try to get up, and the room immediately shakes.
Nausea rolls in like a wave, not sharp, deep, internal, as if your body has emptied itself and now doesn't know what to hold you in the world with. You grab the edge of the mattress. Your fingers are weak. The skin on your hands seems to have shrunk, tightened around your bones. You look at yourself and see that your wrists are thinner than you remember. But what exactly do you remember? Water. Cobblestones after the rain. A dark street. Someone's voice arguing at the pump. A bucket. And then an unbearable thirst. You hear that sound under the floor again, dragging, wet, barely audible. It seems closer now. You turn your head, but all you see is a long passage between the beds, and at the end, the dark figure of a nurse or orderly. She holds the lamp low, so that the light falls not on her face, but on the hem of her skirt, on the floor, on the wheels of a small cart. Her face remains in shadow. She does not look at you. She walks slowly, so slowly, as if sudden movements are not allowed in this ward. The bed to your left creaks. A man lies there. You're not sure how old he is. In this light, people age before your eyes. His cheeks are sunken. His eyes are open, but they're not looking at you. Not at the ceiling. Somewhere beyond, into the space where there's no longer a room, no lamps, no metal frames. His lips move. You think he's praying. Instead, you hear only one word. Water. And again. Water. You want to say it too. Trying to swallow doesn't work. Your mouth is as dry as dust. You run your tongue over your cracked lip and feel salt. Not blood, just the salt of sweat that is cooled. Someone on the far bed is moaning. A woman's voice is heard even further away. Not a scream, not a cry. It's the whisper one uses to talk to God when they're no longer sure he's listening. Then quick steps, the metallic clank of a spoon against a bowl. The door at the end of the ward opens, and for a moment the corridor gives off a slightly different light, yellower, livelier. You catch a glimpse of two men in aprons, narrow shoulders, a folded sheet in their hands. Then the door closes. Sheet. Folded. In this room, folded sheets don't mean anything good. You try to sit up straighter again. Your chest suddenly feels cold. Not fear, a premonition. As if your mind hasn't caught up with your body yet, but your body already knows. You're not at home. Not in an inn. Not in a hospital where people come to lie down for a few days with a cold. They bring people who have had worse things happen to them. Your feet peek out from under the blanket. You don't immediately recognize them as your own. Your feet are pale, almost waxy. Your nails are darker than they should be. Your skin is taut. Dry lines appear on your ankles, as if your body has given up all it could to water. In the 19th century, doctors were still arguing about what cholera was. Some believed in miasmas, noxious fumes rising from dirty streets, canals, rotting markets, and crowded courtyards. Others suspected water, but the truth had not yet fully taken hold of the city. The average Londoner knew nothing of bacteria, had not seen germs, had not heard the word Vibrio cholerae. She knew only one thing. A healthy person in the morning could be dead by dawn. And now this thought enters your head not as a fact from a book, like cold. You are in a ward where those who are being dried alive by disease are brought. Somewhere far away, perhaps behind a wall, a bucket is clattering. A nurse approaches. You hear the rustle of her skirts, the faint clink of glass. In her hand is not a lamp, but a dark bottle and a tin mug. She is not young. You can tell by her posture, by the way she moves economically, without wasting any unnecessary strength or pity. Her face is thin. Round glasses on her nose glint in the light. She approaches the man on her left, tries to lift his head, but he is too weak. Water or medicine is running down his chin. You look at her. She senses it and turns her eyes to you. Only for a moment, but that is enough. There is no surprise in her gaze, so she was waiting for you to wake up.
There is no relief either. This is worse. So recovery here is not considered a miracle to be greeted with a smile. She approaches your bed. "Don't get up abruptly," she says quietly. Her voice is even. It is dull. The voice of someone who has repeated this perhaps 20 times in the last few days. You want to ask where you are. You want to ask what's wrong with you. But all that comes out is a hoarse whisper. Water. She tilts her head as if she's heard it countless times, and yet thinks before answering each time. "A little," she says. "Just a little." She raises the mug to your lips. The water is warm, maybe with a hint of vinegar or some salts. The taste is unpleasant, but your body welcomes it like a gift. You swallow too quickly. She puts the mug away. That's enough. What kind of place is this? She looks at you longer, perhaps deciding how much truth a person who has just come to her senses can handle. "Highbury," she says. Then she adds, as if that weren't enough, "The cholera ward." The words fall between you hard and easy. The cholera ward. You should be surprised. You should be scared right away. But your first reaction is stranger than fear. It's recognition. It's like your body is saying, "Yes, now everything makes sense." Thirst, weakness, cold extremities, cramps you haven't thought about yet, but which are about to make your calves twitch. Yesterday's or the day before yesterday's diarrhea, so debilitating that people compared it to life itself flowing out of it. Doctors at the time called some of the stools rice water because they were pale, murky, almost odorless, and it's a phrase so commonplace that it sends a chill through you more than any scream. "How long have I been here?" you whisper. Enough. Not an answer, almost a sentence. She moves on. You're left alone with that phrase. Enough for what? To save? Or to know if you should prepare a sheet? There is a commotion in the far corner of the ward. Someone calls for the doctor. Someone mutters, "Hold him." All you see is the movement of shadows, the flash of a lamp, the glint of a metal bowl. The person on that bed is covered by a figure in a dark coat. Then everything is quiet as suddenly as it began. There is no relief. On the contrary, the silence here is more terrible than the screams. In the middle of the 19th century, cholera outbreaks came to London in waves. 1832, 1849, 1854. Each wave claimed thousands, most of them in the poor areas, where people lived in several families in damp rooms, where water was taken from columns near cesspools, where sewage flowed directly into the Thames, and the Thames returned its own disease to the city in mugs, buckets, and boilers. For a wealthy person, cholera was terrible news from another block. For a poor person, it was almost a neighbor who could knock at any night. You breathe in deeper, and now you catch something else in the smell of the ward. Chlorine lime, or something they try to kill, human weakness, vomit, sweat, and dirty water. In those years, the wards were rubbed with vinegar, sprinkled with solutions, windows were opened,
burned, washed, aired, not because they knew exactly the nature of the disease, but because the city believed that bad air brought death. And although the cause was often in the water, dirty air, without a doubt, did not help anyone either. From somewhere to the right comes a child's voice. You shudder. The voice is too quiet, almost thin. You turn your head and see not a child, but a small woman, perhaps about 16, so exhausted that she seems like a girl. She is sitting in bed, her hands clasped around her knees and looking at one point. Someone has covered her shoulders with a blanket, but she does not notice. Victorian wards were not entirely male or female, as we sometimes imagine. In moments of overload, during epidemics, order has given way to the need to simply put the bodies somewhere, still alive or not yet dead. You close your eyes for a second. That sound under the floor returns, clearer now. A rustling, a slurping, a soft sliding. You freeze. Under your bed? In the corridor? In the walls? London was infested with rats at that time, and hospitals were no exception.
But it doesn't sound like fast pause. The sound is slow, dragging, like cloth getting wet and being pulled by the edge. In the darkness, imagination takes over. You look down, but from where you are, all you can see is the shadow of the bed frame and a strip of black floor. Nothing. And yet you think there's something there. That's how disease works in places like this. It doesn't just sap your strength. It changes the sound of the room. It changes the shape of the shadow. It makes you wait for explanations for little things that in another life you wouldn't even notice. A man's voice comes from the hallway. A doctor's. Calm to the point of cruelty. The pulse is weak. More hot water bottles. And don't let him drink too much. Victorian medicine in cholera wards was a mixture of courage, helplessness, and mistakes. Patients were given opium, laudanum, calomel, mustard plasters, hot compresses, brandy, saline solutions when they were beginning to understand that the body was dying from terrible fluid loss. There were doctors who tried to inject saline solutions into the veins, an early, crude attempt to bring a person back from the point where the blood thickened and the skin turned cold and bluish. Sometimes it worked wonders for a few hours. Sometimes it didn't. You feel a cramp in your leg, sudden, hard. She twists your calf so sharply that you involuntarily grab the blanket. Your breathing is ragged. Your eyes water not from grief, but from your body fighting for every drop it has already lost. A nurse appears nearby, a young, freckled man with rolled-up sleeves. He sees your spasm and just nods, as if checking something off a long, familiar list. "Keep your feet warm," he says, "even though you have nothing to do." He walks on. His indifference is not from cruelty. It's just that in a crowded ward, sympathy is a luxury that takes time. The micro hook comes almost imperceptibly. On the wall opposite your bed, between two lamps, hangs a small board with chalk marks. Names, numbers, dates. You can't see them clearly, but you notice that some of the names are not completely erased. It's as if they can't erase the old ones faster than they can write the new ones. How many of them left here on their own? How many were carried out under that folded sheet? No answer yet. Instead, there's another sound. This time, it's closer. Under your bed, something seems to be clinging to the wood,
barely. One brief, dry touch.
You freeze. Then you hear a rustling, and the darkness under the bed becomes just darkness again. You peer in. Nothing. But now you know for sure that first sound was not a dream. And whatever moves here at night, it is not the first time it has done so. You lie there, listening to the ward, someone else's breathing, water in circles, the creak of belts on a gurney, the distant chime of a clock, perhaps from the corridor, a whisper of prayer, the nervous rattle of glass, a woman's sigh, an old man's cough, and somewhere in between all this, a rustling that comes and goes, as if waiting for you to completely weaken. You don't know yet what it means. You don't know why the doctors here sometimes look not only at the faces of the living, but also at the floor between the beds. You don't know why in some wards the most terrifying thing begins not when the patient stops talking, but when he suddenly starts talking again. So far, you only know this. London outside the walls of the ward is waking up to its morning. Carts are rolling along the streets. Coal is being poured into the cellars. Someone is opening a shop. Someone is drawing water from the pump. Someone does not yet know that with the water, they are bringing death home. And here you are, in the cholera ward, among the flickering lamps, among the beds where people are begging for water, among the shadows that move more slowly than they should. And below you, in the darkness, something rustles again.
How people get to this ward. You wake up a second time, not from sleep, from exhaustion. And for a few seconds, it seems like a different room. The light has changed a little. The lamps are now burning more evenly, and through the narrow, high window at the end of the ward, a pale morning color seeps in. It doesn't warm much. It only shows what was hidden at night. Rows of beds, more than you first thought. Each bed is narrow, iron, with a thin mattress and a rough blanket. The aisles between them are so narrow that two people could barely pass each other. Some patients lie motionless. Others sit, leaning forward, holding their stomachs. Some stare straight ahead, as if afraid to close their eyes. And the same smell is in the air. Damp cloth, vinegar, the faint scent of medicinal tinctures, and something else. Something else. Something salty, unpleasant. The smell of a human body that had lost too much water. In Victorian London, cholera was not just a disease. It came in waves. The city could live peacefully for months. The markets were open. The shops opened at dawn. People filled buckets at the pumps, not thinking about the water. And then, one morning, the first case appeared. 1 death, then 2, then 10, and the city began to whisper, cholera. You feel the cramp run through your leg again. This time it's weaker, but it reminds you that your body has already lost something important. Fluid, strength, warmth. You carefully sit up a little higher. Your head spins, but this time the room doesn't turn over. An old man lies opposite you. You barely saw him at night. Now the light shows more. His face is thin, almost transparent. The skin is stretched over the bones. His eyes are deep set, but they move. He looks at you and speaks slowly. You're new. His voice is dry, like old paper. I think, yes. He nods. Everyone thinks they came here by chance. You're silent. He turns his head to the ceiling, and then they remember water. Water.
The word suddenly resonates more strongly in your memory. You begin to remember. Not all at once. Pictures. A dark street. Night rain. People at the pump. There are hundreds of such pumps in London. Metal hand pumps stand in the streets, in yards, near houses. People come with buckets, jugs, mugs. The water rises from underground layers and seems clean. It is cold, transparent, and no one can see what might be in it. You remember how you drank, for a long time, greedily, because it was a hot day that day, and thirst was stronger than caution. In 1854, a doctor named John Snow began to suspect that cholera was spread not by bad air, as most believed, but by water. He went to areas of London where people were dying by the dozens and wrote down the addresses. He noticed a strange thing. Most of the sick took their water from the same pump, Broad Street. But as you lie here, that idea hasn't become law yet. To most of the townspeople, water still seems safe. You run your hand over your face. Your skin is cold. Too cold. That's another sign. In severe cases of cholera, the body begins to lose water so quickly that the blood thickens and the skin takes on a strange bluish hue. That's why some doctors at the time called it the Blue Death. The Blue Death. You look down at your hands. They're pale. Not yet. But the old man across from you is different. His fingers are darker. His nails are bluish. He sees where you're looking. "See?" he says. You don't answer. It's coming fast. He speaks without fear. It's as if he's describing the weather. "There was a guy here yesterday. Young, strong, brought in the evening." The old man pauses. He didn't speak again until morning. Your gaze involuntarily slides to the end of the ward. There stands the same cart that you saw at night. A folded sheet on it. Clean. White. For now. You feel a coldness in your stomach. And suddenly you remember something else. The road. You were brought here. In a cart. You don't remember the road itself. But you do remember the feeling, as if the city is floating by. The cobblestones thud against the wheels. Someone nearby holds your shoulders to keep you from falling. Someone is talking to the coachman. "Faster!" But the horses can't go any faster, because you're not the only one that night. When cholera comes to a district, the streets start to fill up with such carts. Sometimes the hospitals don't make it. Sometimes people die on the way. There's a sharp sound in the ward. Metal. You turn around. The nurse has dropped a spoon into a bowl. She picks it up and wipes it on the edge of her apron, as if it's the most important thing in the world. But you notice something else. There are dark circles under her eyes, too. She hasn't slept. Maybe not for a single night. Epidemics don't just wear out the sick. They wear out everyone. At the far end of the ward, a door opens. A doctor enters. Tall, dark coat, beard neatly trimmed. He walks slowly between the beds, touching the patient's wrists, looking at their tongues, their eyes, their skin color. Diagnosis in those days was often made without laboratories, just by looking, listening, and feeling. He stops by your bed. His fingers are cold as he takes your wrist. He counts your pulse. 1, 2, 3. His face doesn't change, but you see his eyebrows move slightly.
"When did they bring him in?" he asks the nurse. "Late at night." "Have you had a seizure?" "Twice already." The doctor looks at you, longer than necessary, as if trying to imagine whether you'll be here tomorrow. Then he lets go of your hand. Salt and heating pads. He's about to move on, but suddenly you hear a sound. Again, the same one, under the bed. Louder now, like something caught on wood. You look down sharply, and for a second it seems to you that something has moved in the darkness under the bed frame. Something long, slow. The doctor notices your gaze. "What?" "There," you whisper. He leans over. He looks under the bed. The light from the lamp slides across the floor. Empty. He straightens up. "Rats," he says, as if it's the most normal thing in a hospital. But as he walks on, you see him look back at the floor again, just for a moment. And then you understand. Maybe he's not sure either. And that's just the beginning. Water that shouldn't have been deadly. Morning in the ward comes slowly. Not like in an ordinary city, where the day begins with the noise of the streets, the shouts of vendors, the clang of carts, and the creak of windows opening. Here, morning is like a long, careful breath. The light through the high window has become a little brighter. The gas lamps are not in a hurry to be extinguished. In such wards, shadow is sometimes more dangerous than light. The air is still heavy, but now a new smell has appeared in it. Hot water, vinegar, and something else, like wet wood. You lie there, looking at the ceiling. The cramps in your legs have subsided for a moment, but the weakness has deepened. Your body seems to have emptied, and every movement now reminds you that there is little strength left. An old man coughs quietly nearby. "The day has come," he says, not looking at you. You remain silent. "It's easier here during the day," he adds. A pause. "But not for everyone." You understand what he means. In the darkness of night, death comes more quietly. It is visible during the day. You can hear movement from the far end of the ward. 2 orderlies are pushing the same cart that was standing against the wall. The white sheet is no longer folded. It covers the body. The person who was lying between you a few hours ago is now moving towards the door. No screams, no scenes. In such places, people are accustomed to watching in silence. You are watching too. And suddenly you find yourself thinking, you don't know when exactly this person stopped breathing. Maybe it happened while you were dozing, or when you listened to that strange sound under the floor, or when the nurse gave someone water. Cholera doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it just takes a person away while others have their heads turned away. The orderlies disappear behind the door. The ward is filled with silence again. And it is in that silence that the memory begins to return more clearly. Water. The pump. The line of people. You see it almost as if you were standing there again. The street is narrow, stone. The houses are pressed tightly together, their windows looking down on the courtyard where the pump stands. The metal handle shines from the hands of hundreds of people. Some laugh, some argue. Some say the water here is the best in the whole district. You remember putting down the mug. The water was cold, clean, and it tastes ordinary. No one sees any danger in water, especially in the middle of the 19th century. Most doctors of that time were convinced that diseases are spread by the air, bad fumes, miasmas that rise from rotting canals, from dirty streets, from cramped yards. And if a person gets sick, it means he has inhaled something wrong. The water seems safe. The water seems clean. The water seems life. And that is why cholera comes so quietly. You turn your head. The same doctor appears in the aisle between the beds. He walks slowly but carefully. He has a small notebook in his hand. From time to time, he makes notes in it. He approaches the bed opposite you, to the old man. "How is your night?" The old man shrugs his shoulders. "As usual." The doctor checks his pulse. His fingers lie on his wrist for a long time. "Stomach pain?" There was. "Convulsions?" There were. The doctor nods. In those years, doctors often worked almost like observers. They wrote down symptoms. They compared. They argued with each other. Why do some people die in a few hours, while others live for a few days? Why does everyone in one house get sick and no one in the next? Why does an epidemic start in one neighborhood and move like a wave? While the city was searching for answers, people were dying faster than explanations came. The doctor approaches your bed. His gaze is attentive. "Better?" You don't know what to say. "I don't know." He takes your wrist again. This time, longer. Pulse is weak. This doesn't sound like a sentence, but it doesn't sound like a promise either.
Do you remember where you were yesterday? The question comes unexpectedly. You think, "Water," you say. "What?" "A pump." He looks at you more carefully. "What pump?" You close your eyes, and you see that street again, the cobblestones, a bucket, a metal handle, and a sign on the wall next to it, the name. You open your eyes. Broad Street. The doctor doesn't move, but you can see that this answer is important to him. In 1854, it was this column that became the key to solving the epidemic. Dr. John Snow convinced the local authorities to remove the handle from the pump on Broad Street after proving that most of the sick were getting their water there.
When the pen was removed, new cases began to disappear. But now, in your ward, it is still just a suspicion, still just a thought, still just a thread that not everyone is ready to pick up. The doctor closes his notebook. "Rest," he says, and walks on. You look after him, and suddenly you hear the sound again, the same one, under the floor. Now it is a little longer, as if something heavy is being slowly dragged along the wood. You tense up, and this time it is not just you. The old man opposite also raises his head. "Do you hear?" You nod. "These are not rats," he says quietly. You look at the floor. The dark crack between the boards seems deeper than it should be. And for the first time, another thought appears. What if the sound isn't coming from below? What if from the other side of the floor? The old man looks at you. His eyes are dark. There are things here that doctors don't like to talk about. You remain silent. But you'll find out later. He lies down again, and the room slowly fills with sounds again. Coughs, footsteps, the rustling of blankets, and that strange sound, which will come back again, a little later. When you realize that the danger in this room doesn't only come from the water. The day the city starts to fear water. The morning light has now fully entered the ward, but it doesn't make it any brighter. On the contrary, now you can see more faces, more bodies, more blankets under which people lie too still, and more who are still trying to fight. You feel the cold in your fingers, not like the cold you feel in winter. This is a different cold, internal, as if the warmth has left your body
and now knows no way back. You press your hands against the blanket, trying to warm them. Your skin is dry, taut. The spasms come in waves, short, sharp, and then recede, leaving an emptiness behind. The ward wakes up, not with noise, with movement. Someone tries to sit up. Someone asks for water. Someone whispers a prayer. A nurse walks between the beds with a bucket of warm water and a small glass. She gives a sip to one patient, then another, as if she's giving away something too precious to waste. The old man across from you looks at you. "When did it start?" "I don't know," you say. He chuckles softly. "Nobody knows." He pulls the blanket up to his chest. At first the city thinks it's just an illness, something normal, a fever, a stomachache. People think they'll survive. A pause. Then the carts start. You know what he's talking about, because now you remember more. The night, the street, and the first moment you realized something was wrong. It happened suddenly. First, a stomachache, strong but brief. You thought it was just food. Then you got thirsty, so strong that water seemed like the only salvation. You drank, again and again, but the water didn't help. On the contrary, after a few hours, your body began to lose strength. Your legs became cottony. Your hands were cold. Your stomach clenched as if it were being turned inside out. And then you heard the word for the first time: cholera. In the middle of the 19th century, this word spread through the city faster than the disease itself. It went from door to door, from market to church, from tavern to hospital, and everyone knew what it meant: death that comes too quickly. You remember that moment. The street was almost empty. Only one cart drove by. On it lay a man covered with a cloth. The coachman didn't look to the right or left. The people on the sidewalk backed away, because they were afraid of even the air around them. You didn't know that in a few hours you would be lying in the same cart. Suddenly, you hear a noise in the ward. 2 orderlies enter from the corridor. This time, they are not carrying a cart, a stretcher. A man lies on it, young, too young for such a face. His skin is strangely gray, not just pale, almost ashen. His eyes are half open. His lips are dark. His body is shaking from convulsions, so severe that the stretcher shudders. He is placed on a bed nearby. The doctor comes over immediately. "When did it start?" "In the morning," one of the orderlies answers. "He worked at the market." The doctor quickly checks his pulse. A pause. Then he says quietly to the nurse, "A serious case." You watch. And you see what you often see in Victorian hospitals: a human body that loses water so quickly that the skin begins to change color. The blood thickens. The vessels constrict. The limbs cool. And then the same shade appears: bluish. That's why cholera was sometimes called the Blue Death. Blue Death. The man on the bed begins to speak. The words are difficult to make out. "Water." The nurse gives him a sip, but his hands are already shaking so badly that the water is spilling onto the blanket. After a few minutes, his voice dies down. The doctor looks at his watch. Then he writes something in a notebook. This is the first historical shock scene. In 1849, during a major cholera epidemic in London, some patients died within 10 hours of the onset of symptoms.
Hospital journals from the time described cases of people working in the morning and lying in their ward with cramps and cold hands in the evening. Sometimes death came before dawn. You look at the man. His chest is still moving, but slowly, as if every breath is work. The old man across from you says quietly, "He won't live through the day." You look at him. How do you know? He doesn't answer right away. Then he nods toward the wall, where the nameplate hangs. "Because I've seen it before." You look there. A new line has already been written. The chalk is still fresh. And suddenly, the sound again, the same one, under the floor, longer this time, as if something is moving under the boards. You look down, so does the old man, and he says quietly, "Do you hear?" You nod. He leans closer. His voice is almost a whisper. "It's beginning." "What?" He looks at the floor. "The things doctors don't talk about." And at that moment, a short thump is heard from under one of the boards, as if something from below has pushed a tree. The room freezes. The doctor raises his head, and for the first time, you see on his face not indifference, but doubt. Why doctors sometimes waited longer. After a knock on the floor, the room freezes for a few seconds. No one speaks. Even the coughing stops, as if the sound itself is afraid to move. You look at the boards by your bed, dark, old, with thin cracks between them. In London hospitals at that time, the floors were rarely perfectly flat. The boards were cracking. Some were slightly raised at the edges. Water, dust, sometimes even garbage got into the cracks. Sometimes rats. The doctor is the first to break the silence. He takes a step closer. Another. He leans in. The lamp in his hand casts a narrow beam of light on the floor. Nothing. Only wood. Only the shadow of the bed frame. He straightens up. "Old boards," he says. But his voice doesn't sound as confident as before. You notice it. The old man across from you does too. He chuckles softly. "Old boards," he repeats. The doctor glances at him briefly. Then he walks on between the beds. The ward slowly returns to its sounds. Someone coughs. Someone asks for water. Someone mutters a prayer. But now there's something else in the air. Expectation. You feel it as clearly as the cold in your hands. The old man leans towards you. His voice is quiet. "Have you heard the stories?" "What ones?" "About those who were buried alive." The words hang in the air. In Victorian England, the fear of being buried alive was almost an obsession. Doctors couldn't always pinpoint the exact moment of death. The pulse became weak. Breathing was almost imperceptible. The body was cold. Sometimes the person looked dead, but they weren't. That's why some doctors checked their patients with a mirror. They would hold a small mirror to their lips. If the glass was fogged up, it meant they were still breathing. The old man looked at you carefully. Sometimes they wait longer than necessary here. Why? Because they're afraid of making a mistake. You swallowed. Your throat was dry. "And what?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes slowly moved from your face to the floor. "Sometimes people wake up." The words sounded almost calm, but that's why they were more frightening. You looked at the boards. The darkness between them seemed deeper. There was a noise coming from the corridor. The door opens. The orderlies are back. The cart is back in the ward.
On it is the same body that was taken away a few minutes ago. You don't understand right away, until you hear the nurse's voice. "Doctor!" The doctor returns. "What happened?" The orderly shrugs. He says. A pause. "He collapsed." The ward freezes again. The doctor approaches the cart. He lifts the edge of the sheet. The man who was just carried out is lying there. His eyes are open, and he is breathing. Very weakly, but he is breathing. This is the second historical shock scene. In Victorian hospitals, there are several cases where patients who were already thought to be dead from cholera were found alive minutes or even hours later. The disease could slow the pulse and breathing so much that the doctors were mistaken. The doctor quickly orders, "Back to bed." The orderlies lift the man. They lay him on the nearest bed. The nurse brings hot water bottles. The doctor bends over. Fingers on the wrist. Pause. There's still a pulse. The old man across from him whispers softly, "See?" You look, and for the first time you think of something else. Not the water, not the disease, but what could happen if the doctor makes a mistake. And at that very moment, the sound under the floor returns, this time louder and longer. It feels like something is moving down there, slowly. It feels like it's trying to get out. The old man looks down, and he says quietly, "That's why some doctors check twice." You look at the boards, and suddenly you realize one simple thing. If there's someone down there, it's not a rat. The room where they waited before the burial. The sound under the floor does not disappear. It is not loud, not harsh, but now you hear it more clearly. A slow slide, a light blow, a pause, and again, as if something heavy were moving in a narrow space. The ward continues to live its life. Someone coughs. A nurse pours water into a mug. A doctor speaks to an orderly at the door. But for you now, everything is different. You listen. The old man opposite, too. He looks down and says quietly, "Beneath us." What? He raises his eyes. Dead. The word sounds ordinary, as if he is talking about a basement. But in this ward, basement means something else. Many Victorian hospitals had what were called dead rooms. They were located next to or below the wards. They were where deceased patients were taken before being sent to the morgue or cemetery. Sometimes these rooms were cold, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were crowded, especially during epidemics. You look at the floor, and suddenly you realize that the hospital you're in is old, very old. There could be anything under the boards, a staircase, a pantry, or the same room. The door to the ward opens. Another doctor comes in, a junior one. He speaks softly, but you hear part of the conversation. "There's almost no more room." "In the basement?" asks the senior doctor. "Yes." "Then use the other room." The younger one nods and leaves. You look at the old man. "They keep them there?" "Yes." "Why not immediately to the morgue?" The old man smiles a little. It's a sad smile. "Because the doctors are afraid." "What?" He leans closer. "To make a mistake." In Victorian medicine, there was a rule that not everyone followed, but many remembered. Don't rush the burial. The reason was simple and scary. Sometimes people woke up. This was not a fiction. In medical journals of the 19th century, there were cases where patients who were thought to be dead from cholera suddenly showed signs of life after some time.
The pulse was too weak, breathing almost imperceptible. The body is cold. And the doctors were wrong. That's why some hospitals left the bodies for several hours, sometimes overnight, to make sure. You feel a chill along your spine. That is, you say. Yes, the old man replies. They are waiting. You look at the floor. The sound returns. This time it is louder, as if something had fallen. A short thud, then a rustling, and a pause. You feel your heart beating faster. Is that from the basement? You whisper. The old man is silent. Then he says, maybe. At the far end of the ward, a nurse turns sharply. She heard it too. The doctor walks to the door. He opens it, listens. Another sound comes from below. This time everyone hears it. A dull thud, like a hand hitting wood. The ward is silent. The doctor looks at the orderly. Check. The orderly doesn't look happy, but he nods. He takes the lamp and goes out into the corridor. His footsteps slowly recede. Stairs. A creak. Then silence. Long. Unpleasant. You look at the old man. It could be anything, he says. But his voice is no longer so confident. A minute passes. Then 2. Then rapid footsteps are heard in the corridor. The orderly turns back. His face turns pale. The doctor looks at him. Well? The orderly swallows. In the basement, he says. Pause. One of them moved there. Several quiet cries can be heard in the ward. The doctor walks abruptly to the door. I'll take a look myself. He takes the lamp and disappears into the corridor. The old man looks at you. His voice is barely audible. See? What? He says slowly. In this hospital, sometimes those who have already been recorded dead wake up. You look at the floor, and you understand. That sound could not have come from a rat, and not from a tree, but from a person. Down the stairs. The door to the ward has not yet closed after the doctor. You look into the dark corridor. There, the light of the lamp he took with him slowly melts. The yellow light moves down, disappearing around the bend of the stairs, and the ward is left alone again. But not the same as before. Now everyone knows that the sound was real. Someone was moving under the floor. The old man opposite sits a little higher. He will go there alone, he says. Why alone? Because doctors don't like witnesses. You look at the door. Witnesses to what? The old man is silent. Then he answers quietly. A mistake. You can hear the creaking of the stairs in the corridor. The doctor's steps are slow, careful. In the old hospitals of London, the stairs to the basements were narrow, stone, damp. The air there was colder than in the wards, but no cleaner. They kept coal, old stretchers, and sometimes medicines there, and often bodies. The same waiting mortuaries or waiting rooms. It was a strange practice, but it appeared for a reason. In the 19th century there were even special buildings in Europe, Leichenhäuser, where bodies were left for several days until obvious signs of death appeared.
In some places, bells were tied to fingers. If a person woke up, they could ring the bell. It sounds like a legend. But in medical journals of the time, such proposals were discussed quite seriously. You look at the floor, and you try to imagine what the doctor is seeing now. A dark basement. A table. Bodies. Maybe several. Covered with sheets. And one of them moved. Everyone in the ward is listening, even those who can barely lift their heads. The woman in the far bed has stopped praying. The orderly stands by the door as if deciding whether to go for the doctor or not. The old man whispers, "If he's really alive." He doesn't finish the sentence, because everyone knows what that means. If a person wakes up after being recorded dead, it's not just a mistake. This is proof
that the line between life and death here is thinner than they thought. A few minutes have passed, maybe 3, maybe 5. Time moves strangely in such wards, and suddenly, footsteps are heard in the corridor, fast. The doctor turns, his face turns pale, but not from fear, from concentration. "Hot water bottles," he says, "and water." The nurse is already moving. "Is he alive?" The doctor nods briefly. Hardly. The ward fills with movement. The orderlies take the stretcher. The doctor walks ahead with a lamp. And for the first time all morning, you feel something different. Not fear. Curiosity. Because now you know. That sound under the floor was real. And someone there really woke up. A few minutes later they return. A man lies on the stretcher. His body is stiff. His skin is gray. His eyes are closed. But his chest is moving barely perceptibly. Breathing. He's still here. He's being placed on a bed nearby. The doctor quickly checks for a pulse. Weak. But there is. The old man looks at you. "See?" You nod, and suddenly you notice something strange. There are marks on the man's hands. Scratches, as if he's been scratching wood. The doctor sees it too, and for a second his face changes. "He wasn't in the basement for long," he says. "Good, because sometimes people wake up later, and then—" The old man finishes the thought for him. "Then they can't get out." The ward is silent again, but now the fear is different. Now it's not just cholera, it's a thought. The thought that someone could have woken up under you, and no one would have heard it. You look at the floorboards, and you understand one thing. If it happened once, then it could have happened before. And maybe that's why some doctors here look at the floor longer than they do at their patients.
The street where water became a sentence. The ward is no longer the same. Something has changed since the doctor came back from the basement. Now everyone knows. Not just about the cholera, but about the fact that the line between living and dead in this place can be a mistake. The man who was lifted from the basement lies quietly. His breathing is barely audible. The nurse has placed heating pads at his feet, covered him with a blanket, but his body still looks as if it has lost its heat long ago. The doctor checks his pulse again. "If he survives another hour," he says quietly. And he doesn't finish the sentence. In Victorian hospitals, sometimes surviving an hour was enough to increase the chance of survival a little. But sometimes even that wasn't enough. You look at him, and suddenly you realize that the doctors in this ward look at the patients almost as if they were enigmas, not just as people. Every body is a question. Why does one survive? Why does another die? And why does illness sometimes come in whole blocks? At the far end of the ward, the door opens again. This time, the young doctor enters.
the one who was there before. He has a piece of paper in his hand. He approaches the senior doctor. You hear part of their conversation. Broad Street again. The senior doctor stops. How many? 5 more. Pause. In the same street. The senior doctor looks down. Something seems to be forming in his head, but he doesn't say it out loud yet. The old man across the way whispers softly, Broad Street. You're looking at him. Do you know this place? He nods. Everyone knows. And he begins to speak slowly, as if remembering. A few days ago, everything was normal there. People went to the market. Children played. Women got water from the pump. He pauses. Then the deaths began. You listen, because now you understand. The history of this ward did not begin here. It began on the street.
Historical shock scene. In August 1854, one of the most terrible local epidemics of cholera occurred in the Soho district of London. Over 500 people died in a few days. Some houses lost half their inhabitants. In one house, 5 members of one family died in one night. And almost all of them got water from the same fountain, Broad Street. Dr. John Snow began to go from door to door. He wrote down the addresses of the deceased, and suddenly he saw a pattern. Most of them were using the same pump. He convinced the local government to do a strange thing. Take the handle off the pump. Just take it off. And when people couldn't pump water anymore, the epidemic began to disappear. But at this moment, in this ward, this story is not over yet. You look at the doctors. They speak quietly. But now you understand what they are saying. If it's water, then why not everyone? Because not everyone drinks from that pump. You feel the cold, because you remember. You drank. The old man looks at you. You were there too. That's not a question. You nod. And for the first time you realize that this ward may not be a random group of people, and people from the same story, from the same street, from the same pump. And suddenly, the sound again, under the floor. But now it's different. Not a blow, not a rustle, but a soft knock, as if something light were touching wood. Once. Pause. 2. The old man raises his head. Did you hear that? You nod. The knock repeats, a little closer this time. You look at the floor, and suddenly a thought comes to mind that sends chills down your spine. What if this isn't a random sound? What if... Is this a signal? The old man whispers. They left another one in the basement. How do you know? He's looking at you. Because I've heard that sound before. Pause. When they wake up. You look at the boards, and you understand. That man who was pulled out, maybe he wasn't the only one. A knock that shouldn't be. The knock repeats. Once. Pause. Then again. Quiet, but clear enough for several people in the room to hear. You don't move. No one moves. Even the nurse stops in the middle of the aisle with a mug in her hand. The sound comes from below, from under the floorboards. And now it doesn't sound like a rat. Rats are scratching, running, scraping, and this sound, different. Like someone touching wood, slowly, as if checking. The old man across from you whispers, "Again." You look at him. You said you heard it before. He nods. A few years ago. Here? In another hospital. He speaks slowly, as if choosing his words. The man is dead. At least, that's what everyone thought.
They took him to the basement. It was colder there. They waited until morning for the cart from the morgue to arrive. The old man pauses. And at night, they heard a knock. Someone in the ward is coughing softly, but you can hardly hear it. And what happened? The old man looks at the floor. They went down. Pause. And they found him. Alive? Yes. You feel your heart beating faster. The knock repeats. A little closer now. Once. Twice. Like someone tapping weakly on wood. The doctor hears it too. He raises his head. His gaze slowly glides across the floor. Did you hear? The nurse asks quietly. The doctor doesn't answer right away. Then he says, maybe. But his voice is no longer so confident. He looks at the orderly. Is there another one left in the basement? The orderly thinks. Yes. Who? That man from this morning. Young man? Yes. The doctor looks at the floor. And for the first time, you get the feeling that he's afraid too. Not of cholera, but of mistakes. In the 19th century, doctors often worked on the edge of knowledge. They couldn't see the bacteria. They didn't know exactly how the infection worked. Sometimes all they could do was watch and wait. But waiting has its price. The knock comes again, now louder. As if a hand had struck the wood a little harder. Several people in the ward begin to whisper. There's someone there. It's from the basement. Oh my God. The doctor turns around sharply. Silence! The ward freezes again. He looks at the orderly. A lamp. The orderly hands it over. The doctor takes the lamp. The light makes his face sharp. I'll go down. The nurse looks at him. Alone? Yes. If he's alive. The doctor answers briefly. Then we have no right to leave him there. He goes to the door. You watch him. The door opens. The light of the lamp disappears again in the dark corridor. The stairs creak. The footsteps slowly move away. And then the knocking stops. Completely. The ward waits. A minute passes. Then 2. All you hear is people breathing, and your own heart. The old man says quietly, sometimes they don't make it. You look at him. What do you mean? He doesn't answer, because at that moment you hear footsteps in the corridor. Fast. The doctor turns around, but now he's not alone. The orderlies are carrying a stretcher, and there's a man on it, the second one. His face is pale, his lips are blue, his eyes are closed. But when they put him on the bed, you see movement, barely noticeable. His chest rises, slowly. The old man whispers, there he is. You look, and you understand one thing. That knock saved his life. If they hadn't heard it, he would have stayed there, in the dark, among the bodies, and no one would have known. The doctor leans over, checks the pulse. A long pause. Then he says quietly, he's still here. The ward exhales, but the relief is short-lived, because the old man looks at the floor, and he says almost in a whisper, but the question is different. What? He slowly answers, how many times has no one heard that knock? You look at the boards, and suddenly you understand. Beneath you, there may be more stories. Much more.
When hospitals can't keep up.
The ward becomes quiet for a few minutes. Not because of relief, because of fatigue. The man who was pulled from the basement is now lying on a bed against the wall. The nurse has placed heating pads under his feet, covered him with a blanket up to his chin. His face is still, but his chest is slowly rising. Each breath sounds heavy, as if the body has been turned from where it almost went. The doctor checks his pulse again. A long time. Then he straightens up. If he survives until evening, he doesn't finish his sentence. Doctors rarely speak in full in this ward, because here words can become promises, and promises during epidemics are a dangerous thing. You look at the floorboards. The knocking doesn't happen again, but now you know that there really is a basement beneath you, and there are people in it. At least there were. The old man opposite says slowly, "When an epidemic starts..." He pauses. At first, the hospitals think they can cope. You listen. Then the second day comes, the third, and suddenly there are more patients than beds. In the 19th century, this happened often. Cholera did not come slowly. It came in waves. First a few people, then dozens, then hundreds, and the hospitals began to suffocate. The old man continues. I saw how in the hospital in Whitechapel they put beds even in the corridors, then in the courtyard. Then they just stopped accepting patients. You feel the cold, because you understand what that means. When the hospital is full, people stay home, and they often die there. At the far end of the ward, a nurse opens a window. The air from the street comes in. Colder, but no cleaner. In Victorian London, the smell of the city was a mixture of smoke, coal, rotting waste, and the River Thames, which took in almost everything the city threw away. Sometimes doctors believed that this smell carried the disease, miasmas, bad air, but some were already beginning to have doubts. The doctor at the door speaks quietly to a junior colleague. How many today? 7, and that's just our area. Pause. If this keeps up... He doesn't finish the sentence, but everyone knows what's next. Then the hospitals won't have time. Historical shock scene. During major cholera epidemics in London, the authorities were sometimes forced to open mass graves. Long trenches were dug in cemeteries. Bodies were wrapped in cloth or simple coffins and buried one by one, sometimes dozens a day. In some areas, church bells rang so often that people stopped counting them. Sometimes even priests did not have time to hold a service for everyone. You look at the doctors, and you understand one thing. If the epidemic gets stronger, then waiting until a person is certainly dead will be a luxury. And then, mistakes may become more frequent. The old man looks at you. Do you understand now? What? Why don't doctors sometimes check twice? You are silent, because you understand. When there are too many people, too little time. And sometimes the body is simply taken away, even if no one is completely sure. There is movement again in the ward. The man who was pulled from the basement groans softly. The nurse leans over him. He comes to. The doctor comes closer. His face is tense. It's a miracle, the old man says quietly, or a warning. You're looking at him. About what? He looks at the floor. That there may be more stories beneath us than we think. And at that very moment, a new sound is heard from under the boards. Not a knock, not a blow, but a soft breath. It's like air is passing through a crack. You look down, and suddenly you realize the basement hasn't said its last word yet. Return to the sound. The sound. the same one. Now you recognize it immediately. A wet slide. A short thud. Pause. It was the sound that started it all. When you first woke up. When you didn't know where you were. When you thought it was a dream. Now the ward hears it again. And this time, more people are paying attention. The nurse freezes by the bed. The orderly at the door raises his head. Even the man who was pulled from the basement barely moves, as if the sound is piercing through his half-oblivion. The doctor stands in the middle of the ward. He looks at the floor. A long time. There is no doubt in his eyes now. Again, he says quietly. The old man opposite nods. I told you. The knock repeats. Once. Pause. 2. Now it's clear. And everyone knows where it's coming from. The basement. You feel a cold slowly run down your spine. Because now you understand. It's not the man they pulled out. He's already here. On the bed. So there's someone else down there. The doctor turns sharply to the orderly. A lamp. The orderly is already holding it. The doctor takes the lamp. His face is illuminated by yellow light. Shadows fall sharply. If there's another one, he doesn't finish. But everyone knows what's going to happen. Then they've almost buried someone alive for the second time. He goes to the door. The orderly hesitates for a second. I'll go with you. The doctor nods. Okay. They go out into the corridor, and the ward is left listening again. Footsteps. The creak of the stairs. Then silence. The old man looks at you. Do you understand now? What? Why did I say this was just the beginning? You look at the floor. The knocking stops, as if the one who made it is waiting. A minute. 2. 3. Time stretches. All you can hear in the ward is people breathing. And then a voice comes from below. Faint but human. You can't make out the words, but it's a voice. Alive. Several people in the ward are taking sharp breaths.
The old man whispers,
My God.
I can hear movement in the corridor, footsteps, louder, faster. The doctor turns, but now everything is different. He carries the lamp high. The orderlies walk behind, and between them, a person. A man. He can barely stand. The orderlies support him by the arms. His face is white as a sheet, but his eyes are open. Alive. The ward is watching. No one speaks. The doctor leads him to the bed. The orderlies carefully lay him down. The doctor checks his pulse. A long time. Then he says slowly, He is alive. The old man opposite laughs softly, not joyfully, sadly. Twice a day. The doctor is silent. You see him looking at the floor as if he's counting, as if he's thinking. How many times could this have happened before? How many times has the knock not been heard? He turns to the nurse. No one goes to the basement right away today. She nods. We'll wait. In the 19th century, some hospitals began to introduce a rule. Bodies were not sent to the morgue right away. They were left for several hours, sometimes overnight. It was because of cases like this, when a person looked dead, but wasn't. You look at the boards, and you understand. That sound you heard in the morning was not accidental. It was a person knocking, because she was still alive. And now this story is almost complete. Almost. Because there's another thing you're beginning to understand. If cholera can make a person so weak that they're taken for dead, then how many people didn't knock?
Between life and silence. The ward slowly calms down, as if the storm has passed by, but not quite gone. 2 men who have just been lifted from the basement are now lying on beds against the wall. A nurse walks between them with a lamp, checking their breathing, adjusting the blankets. They are alive, at least for now. But everyone in the ward knows that this is not yet a victory. In the days of cholera, life was often measured in hours. You lie still, and you look at the floorboards. There are no more sounds from there. None. Only silence. The same silence that sometimes comes after a heavy rain. The old man opposite also looks down. "Now you understand," he says quietly. "What? Why doctors sometimes don't trust death right away." He says this as if he were repeating an old truth. In the 19th century, cholera was one of the most mysterious and terrifying diseases. It came on suddenly. A person could be healthy in the morning and lying motionless by evening. The body lost water so quickly that the skin became cold. The pulse almost disappeared. Breathing became barely noticeable. Sometimes people looked as if they were already dead, but in fact they were still alive. That's why doctors sometimes checked their breathing with a mirror. That's why bodies were sometimes left for several hours. That's why there were those strange waiting rooms under the wards, to give death time to become real, and not just look like it. The nurse approaches the man who was pulled out first. She leans over, touches his forehead. "Warmer," she says quietly. The doctor nods. Okay, it's a small victory. But even now, he doesn't look happy. He looks at the floor, as if there lies the answer to the question that torments him. How many times could they have been wrong? How many people didn't knock? The old man speaks again. "I remember one night. You're looking at him." "Where?" "In the hospital in the east of the city." He pauses. "Then the cholera came so quickly that there were more bodies in the basement than on the beds. Do you feel the cold?" "And?" He looks at you. "And in the night, one of them started screaming." The ward is silent. "They heard him and saved him." Pause. "But the doctor said one thing that I still remember." "What?" The old man answers quietly. "The scariest thing is not that he woke up. The scariest thing is that the others might not have woken up." You look at the boards, dark, old, and now you understand that under them is not only a basement, but stories. Stories of people who lived at a time when medicine was still searching for answers, when doctors worked almost blindly, when one sound in the darkness could mean the difference between life and burial. The window in the ward is slightly open. The evening air is coming in. Faraway footsteps can be heard on the street. The city is alive. London never stops for long. Epidemics come, epidemics go, and each one leaves something behind. New rules, new fears, and new knowledge. It was after years like these that doctors began to look more carefully at water. It was after stories like these that they began to change the sewer system. And it was after mistakes like these
that medicine became a little more careful. The old man closes his eyes. "Maybe," he says quietly, "one day people will stop being afraid of water." You look at the floor for the last time. Silence. Complete. Not a knock. Not a movement. And now you understand. That sound that woke you up in the morning saved 2 people, and perhaps made the doctors be a little more careful. In this ward, in this hospital, and in the whole city. The lamp slowly goes out. The shadows grow longer, and night falls again on London. But now you know one thing. This was not a horror story. This was the history of medicine, and the history of how people learned to listen, even the quiet sounds under the floor. This is not a horror story. This is history.